Just checking the audio out there. Can you guys hear us okay?
Yes,
Everyone
we
on
can.
Zoom can hear? Okay, bear with us. We just had a little bit of a technical difficulties getting started, and Chair will get calling it here in just a minute.
Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, I guess. Time flies when you're having fun. So I'd like to, so I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everybody that's online. Thank you. I appreciate your time of being here and working with us. Thanks for you guys in the audience too. As it based on attendance right now, we have a quorum and all alternates can vote. So we end up taking that. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda of last month's meeting?
In this month's meeting.
Say again?
This month's meeting.
I'm sorry, the
Motion to approve
The
this
agenda.
month's meeting, Joan.
agenda of this month's meeting. And who was it? Yes, ma'am.
Quick and friendly
Joan.
reminder, make sure to state your name for the motion and to use your microphones in the room so those on Zoom can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Joan. My microphone's on. I made the motion.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Ed Dill seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, agenda's approved. Public comment period for any items not on the agenda. Did any of the members of the CAC have any public comments?
Well, actually, not a public comment. This is Cindy.
Hey, Cindy.
I am only listed as Cindy, but for the record, Bruce Colson from Calhan is also with me. So if you could put him as an attending member.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any public comment for members in the audience? Not seeing any. Will now I'll ask, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of last month's meeting?
So moved.
Joan, move to approve the minutes as presented.
All right, Larry beat you, John. Will you second it?
Sure.
All right, there we go. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing any. Minutes of the meeting are approved. Thank you. Financial reports, Ms. Beverly. Welcome back.
Good afternoon. As you can see on the reports, and the February receipts were 10,727,000, which was 967,000 above the monthly budget, or 9.9%. So another big month. Compared to second page, compared to last year's actual, we were ahead for the month 1,178,000 or 12.3%. Things may slow down. It won't be for a couple months of reporting, but if the interest rates go up, the new house construction is going way down because people can't lock in an interest rate and it takes so long to build a house. So that could impact things along with anything else that I mean, the whole idea of raising interest rates is to cool off the economy. So we might see, at least for the second half of the year, lower receipts.
Okay,
Are there any questions on the other financial reports?
go ahead, Dave.
As always, a great report. Thank you very much. One question I have is not so much about the sales tax increase.
Turn your mic. There-
Hello,
Yeah.
hello. Oh, thank you, David Zelenak. Thank you very much again. A great report as always. The question I have is not so much about the sales tax receipts. These are great numbers. It's well done. I appreciate the information. My question really is about the delta between construction cost inflation and the increase in, I guess this is consumer price inflation driven. But if our revenues go up as they have 10%, let's say, but construction costs are going up 20%. How's the delta? Do you have a sense for that?
So I don't know how much construction costs are going up or what we're experiencing. I'm not sure where we can get that information. I mean, sorry, I needed to do that.
I apologize. Okay, clearly I was not listening. What was the question?
So go ahead and.
Yeah,
repeat the question.
so essentially the question I have is revenues were up roughly 10-ish%. That's great news. But if construction costs are up 20%, we're actually 10% in the red. And I guess my question is, and I know
So
there's
do
a
you know
Denver.
what construction costs are going up?
Yeah,
about?
so we are seeing construction costs. We've had a handful of smaller project bids recently in the city where the costs have come in 25 to 75% above the engineer's estimate. We have been meeting, and we just met with CDOT Monday, and they're also seeing some weird cost escalations upwards in the 30% range, pretty much across the board. So in talks with CDOT and also with the Asphalt Pavement Association, we're kind of getting an idea what some of the drivers are. And it's not necessarily all materials. Some of it is that the hauling costs associated with materials and the delivery materials and then work being performed on site, the lack of being able to get labor, and then the lack of equipment availability. So even if they have a piece of equipment today and they have a piece or something break down, we're talking a year out sometimes in some cases to get parts, and to order new equipment, it's over a year out. So that's consistent with what we're seeing in the city as well when we were trying to order equipment. As far as commodities, we know from an asphalt standpoint, the oil has gone up 52%. So it's just the binder piece that goes in the asphalt. So that's actually a small component when you look at asphalt as a whole, but that's just one more thing that's contributing to cost inflation. So we are seeing huge cost increase, and we the city have 6 big projects going out to bid, and I'm quite concerned. And I can't even project what that escalation is right now, because we just don't have enough history with the new climate.
It's great information. When you say, let's say 35%, is that 35% year to year or 35% over the engineer's estimate? I'm just trying to understand.
Right now, what they're seeing is about 30 to 35% over the engineer's estimate.
Okay.
And in some cases, at least in CDOT's examples, they've had such high bids in a couple projects, they've actually decided to cancel the procurement and reuse that money in other projects where they at least feel like they have reasonable and competitive bids to get construction going.
And keep in mind that that could also be at a 10% design. And as we continue to progress towards the progress of the project, if prices continue to escalate, that's the estimate is based on stuff now and maybe some reasonable projection, but not knowing. I can confirm the equipment engine thing, some of the parts, you cannot find internal engine parts for large diesel engines. And if you've got a big piece of equipment that broke, just getting pistons, rings, and sleeves for an engine is a year wait. So it's, you have to scratch your head and wonder why. But I've got work that needs to be done on mine, and it's been over a year since last August. Wow. So, and they still don't have the parts. So it is, and it's certain brands. It's not all brands. So that's the big thing. Yeah, Jennifer?
Mr. Chair, I just want to add to that. I mean, we are seeing from the county standpoint, similar things as Gail described. So I'm not going to reiterate that. But what I'd also add to is that those are our engineer estimates have already been somewhat inflated as well. So I think
that's twice as bad.
that I don't know from Gail's standpoint, I'm assuming that they're doing a little bit of the same thing, inflating those, because we do know that the costs are escalating. So yeah, that's a large concern for us, especially as we're putting together the estimates for our projects for PPRTA 3. And an example I'd say too, as far as vehicles and equipment, we ordered a piece, just a regular truck about 1.5 years ago, and I finally got that truck in for one of my surveyors. So on top of that, we have also been seeing a large amount of we're lucky at the county at this point, from a gas price increase, we've had ours locked in. But that will also continue to be a concern for us as well. And that significantly affects those hauling costs and the delivery costs of a lot of those materials. So.
I'll add one more statistic to kind
It
of give
gets
you an
worse.
idea. No,
Wait, it gets
unfortunately
worse.
it does. So the city goes through and we bid our overlay contracts, and we do them on a little bit different cycles. So when we did the 2C overlay contracts, those were put in place a handful of months ago. When we got bids in for the next round of overlay contracts that actually get funded through PPRTA funding, we're seeing a 50% increase.
15?
50.
That's what I thought you said.
Yeah, you just wanted to double check.
Yeah, I just
so
wanted to hear you
just to
say
give
it
you an
twice.
idea. Yeah. So I mean, it's shocking. Now, if you think about it, with what happened in 2000, we really saw prices held pretty firm, or actually even almost at a reduced rate, because people wanted to stay busy at the time, not knowing where we were going economically. And so now, between the supply chain issues and where we are from an employment standpoint, just a whole bunch of things, we were having this huge jump in escalation. It's really now establishing what the new normal is and seeing where we're sitting a new baseline, or are things going to start to come back down? And we just don't know the answer to some of that questions yet at this point. And I didn't even hit on the utility issues in the supply chain, but they're an issue too.
Richard?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should eliminate Dave asking any more questions after results like this.
I would second that motion.
All right. Any other questions for Bev? You got anything you want to add up?
Yeah.
Don't see any hands raised or questions for Bev. All right. Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. All right, item 6A, city contracts.
Mr. Chair, Gail Sturtevant, City Engineer and Deputy Public Works Director, representing the City of Colorado Springs today. The city is presenting 10 contracts for the CAC's consideration. I'll go through them, and if you want to raise your hand or give me the signal, I'll try to stop if you've got questions as I'm going through. The first contract is for the Academy Boulevard contract from Milton Proby Parkway to Fountain Boulevard. This is for additional subsurface utility investigation that will be reimbursed as 100% by Colorado Springs Utilities. Purpose for the subsurface utility investigation is for the utilities to come in and add a water line in at Jetwing, and that will intersect with the water line work that they're doing at Academy. That contract would be awarded to AECom for those services and the amount of $19,060. Second contract is for the Black Forest Road widening. There is a map included in your packet, and this is for the last large property acquisition for the Black Forest Road widening project. It's for the Rhoda family. We have 0.629 acres of right-of-way, 1.001 acres of permanent easement, and 0.275 temporary construction easements. The appraised value for that property is $243,050. The property owners have accepted that valuation. City Council did approve this contract in accordance with the city's real estate manual on March 22nd. Questions on that contract? All right, the next contract is 222 Pikes Peak. There is a location map included with your memorandum. I will let you know that you are going to have a presentation later today as part of the transit update that will give you more information about this project. So if you have specifics more about the bigger project, you may want to defer them until you have that questions, and I can answer contract related items at that time. But the reason why we wanted to bring this to the Pikes Peak, the PPRTA, CAC, and then ultimately the board now is to want to let you know the basis of the contract, kind of what's going to be happening now, even though there are no PPRTA dollars included today. We don't know if RTA dollars are going to be asked for in the future, but there is a potential for it. So we want to make sure that you know what's going on from day one with this particular contract. The new transit center is proposed to be constructed through a public-private partnership with Norwood and through the City Auditorium Rural Urban Renewal Authority, and it was located at the northeast, or will be located at the northeast corner of Nevada and Pikes Peak. Any questions on that right now, or can we hold until later if there's specifics? Okay. We have 4 maintenance contracts for CAC's consideration. The first one is for sign materials and signs. The city went through an RFP process and had 2 respondents. The city selected Vulcan Signs and would like are putting a task order based contract in place in the amount of $200,000 based on our appropriations for that activity. Next maintenance contract is for pavement marking materials. The city did go through an RFP process there as well, had 2 respondents. The city is recommending that we have 2 contracts, one with each respondent with a maximum contract amount of $250,000 as approved through our appropriations. And those contracts would go to Crown USA and Ennis Flint. The next maintenance contract is for aluminum sign blanks for the use for the city sign shop to make signs in-house. The city again went through an RFP process, received 2 proposals. Those signs and the city selected or recommended selection of US standard to provide those services with a maximum contract amount of $250,000. And the last maintenance contract is for traffic signposts. Again, RFP process, the city had 3 respondents. They have selected J&A Traffic Products in the amount of $150,000. Questions on those 3 maintenance contracts? All right, the next one is for temporary staffing services. The city went through an RFP, a very extensive RFP process to pre-qualify firms to provide temporary staffing services. The city received 45 proposals.
Oh, wow.
We have, the city overall has selected 8. Public Works has the ability to tap all 8 of those vendors. Historically, we have used 3 of them, in particular for O&M maintenance support activities. As you can see, there's a table provided there for the selected vendors and the maximum contract values anticipated. Currently, because these are labor contracts, there is no executable contract or executable value or task order associated with that right at this point. Questions there? All right. Moving back to Black Forest Road, we would like to put a contract in place with AECOM for engineering services during construction with a maximum value of $314,112. That's to provide service support from AECOM, some additional support from our real estate services, TRS, and Clayton for some of the lighting activities associated with that. Questions there?
Here's a quick one. I was looking at these change orders. What is the reason for so many change orders?
So one of the things we really do, we start with a small scope with these consultants, particularly when you start at the very beginning with their initial contract, and you'll do a lot of conceptual design work or alternatives analysis to make the decision when you want to move forward. And then we'll piecemeal the scope out as we add tasks on there, as we get more project definition. So we're not having a big blanket contract up front with maybe some vagueness in the scope. We try to have very specific scope items. And I could go through each one if you wanted to.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Okay.
don't do that. I just, we don't normally see this many all in one place. Yeah, it kind of confused me when I was reading about it earlier.
Okay.
So I wanted to get it clear in my mind. Thank you.
Okay. And the city's last contract is really more of an update on a contract that was approved last month. If you recall, we had to walk on actually to the board last month, and we informed the CAC previously that we would like to use $100,000 of the on-street bikeway improvements program funding to go towards the Sand Creek Trail crossing at Hancock Expressway. We are still maintaining the $100,000 value underneath that program. But as we went through the process and received bids last month, what seemed to be the apparent low bidder actually was deemed non-responsive by the city's procurement office. So instead of going with the previously identified low bidder, we're going to be going with Olenek, or you always tell me this. Lunik, thank you. I even wrote it down phonetically. You think I could get that correct? Lunik, with an overall value in the contract of $1,268,341.93. The difference from what was presented previously to the board today is made up and covered through the parks TOPS funds. And the details are provided in your memo, along with the location map for that project. Questions on that or any of the other contracts the city's presented today?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question about the Sand Creek crossing there. What makes a contract, a contractor or a bid non-responsive? I don't understand that. Can you just walk through that or explain what that means?
Our procurement specialist is on Zoom as well, so she may want to step in, but they can be deemed non-responsive for a variety of reasons. I had one recently that was not a PPRTA contract. It was deemed non-responsive because they did not meet the DBE goals that were set out by CDOT. And sometimes the contractors are not able to produce documentation or proof of their bonding capacity. Sometimes they may not be able to submit the required documentation for subcontractors. For this particular contract, I do not know the specifics. I could find out or have Parks reach back out to you and let you know, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I just didn't understand it's non-responsive, but it means to me really more non-compliant with the terms of the contract. It's just, I'm not familiar with non-responsive. It sounds like they didn't pick up the phone or didn't respond to a question, but they were unable to meet the requirements of the contract. They submitted a bid, but they failed to meet certain requirements for this contract, and they're deemed non-responsive in that case.
That's correct.
And you don't know the specifics, but generally speaking, they just couldn't comply with the terms.
That is correct.
That was it. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions for Gail on the city's contracts? Do I hear a motion to approve the city's submission of contracts as presented? Dave?
So moved.
So moved. And second? Wade?
Second, Joan.
Somebody in here? Oh, Rick Hoover. Okay, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much, Gail. All right, item 7A, City of Colorado Springs Transit. Brian, I see you in the audience.
Good afternoon, Brian Vituli with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metropolitan Transit. And I'm not used to you getting through the contract items so quickly, but I'm ready.
Yeah, there you go.
So your monthly transit report, where we're looking at ridership for March of 2022. For our fixed route services for the month of March, we provided a little over 144,000 trips. During March, I've been reporting over the last several months, we've still been suffering from a operator shortage, a bus driver shortage. March is when we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We've been able to add a lot more operators out into service, which equates to more service out on the street. We're still not where we need to be. We're still not operating the frequency that we should be on some of our higher ridership routes. But everything that we do have as a route is operating, so we don't have any discontinued services anymore. And, we're hoping over the next several months, as things continue to get better, that we'll be able to add more operators and get back to full service. You'll also notice on here that we dropped off 2020. So we're kind of comparing the current year back to 2019 BC. I like to call that 2019 BC, before COVID. And so we are still down 25% from last March of 2021, but still about 55% down from March of 2019.
Brian, while you're on this, before you go to the other, have you noticed any trends, whether it's nationwide or in other places, that as a result of cutback in public mass transit, that people have found alternative ways to get to where they need to go, and that the ridership trend may not come back up as fast, or maybe not at all, because of some of this? Has there been anybody looking at those kind of things in terms of, you don't want to sit here with expectations that we're going to be back to a 2019 level if that's not where it's going?
No, you put a whole lot out there, and there are a lot of agencies that are in much worse shape than we are. A lot of them are still suffering from revenue shortages from COVID, where they rely heavily on their revenues. We do too, of course, but we're lucky that we have a strong economy and really good tax revenues coming in. And a lot of them are hit a lot harder by the operator shortage. But yeah, there's no doubt that we certainly haven't come back to where we were before March of 2020. And the other agencies haven't either. And there's a lot of debate on whether we'll ever get back to where we were before COVID happened. But I think, at least in the Colorado Springs region here, we have done an awful lot of work to try to make our system more palatable to choice riders. But we still have a strong base of ridership that are still heavily transit dependent. And yeah, that they may have gone to other cities or found other transportation, but we're slowly starting to see the signs that we're coming back. And I don't know, I've made mention to having a crystal ball, and we can debate it all we want. And I think every city is going to be different. Every agency is going to be different, but I think we will bounce back. Hopefully the economy stays strong. Job needs stay strong, and our riders still need us to get around. But it's going to take some time, no doubt, to get back to where we are. But we're doing the best we can, and we're still doing the planning that we need to do to be ready for when conditions change. So,
Okay,
yeah.
great, thanks.
Sure. So on the second page, our ADA paratransit service, we provided about 9,500 trips in March of 2022. That's up 31% from March of 2021. It's still down from 2019. For specialized paratransit taxi choice option, we provided 66 rides. So that's still a program that was kind of restarted some time ago, and it's still trying to get back to where that was, but it's slow in coming. And finally, for our van pool program, that's Metro rides, we operated 7 vans in March of 2022, 39 active riders making a little over 1,000 trips. So that's up 7% from March of 2021, but still down about 70% from March of 2019. So are there any questions on that before we get into what you've all been waiting years to see? But yeah, I'll also add that, we just implemented our spring service change April 24th. So we have 2 of our battery electric buses operating on Route 23, which operates from Morning Sun, which is by Austin Bluffs and Academy, up Barnes, out to Tut and down to Constitution. And then we have 2 other battery electric buses that we're rotating throughout our system and testing them, testing the performance and seeing where they go in the future.
Richard?
The of all the charts we've seen, the van pool situation seems to be the worst. And what is the what do you know what the difference is in the income generated by the van pool versus the cost of the operation?
Not offhand, no.
I'm a big supporter of transit, even though my primary love is highways. The mass transit, the work that you do is, I think, extremely important. And but sometimes I wonder if the van pool operation is really worth it, if it's this bad. And I do think you ought to take a hard look at that. I support you completely. I think you are doing a good job. I think it's a difficult one. And but I'm dismayed at what I see here. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question, good comment. But I just spent several minutes giving a really long answer to Jim's question. All of our services are suffering, and van pools is one of them. It's been heavily impacted by the economy and people moving jobs, and van pools are impacted by that pretty heavily.
Working from home.
Yeah, and I think I see a lot of optimism for that program as the GAP project just finished several months ago. And this fall, there will be the managed lane that gets implemented. Pretty hopeful that will have an impact on our van pool program. But yeah, we have no intention to get rid of that. It's been very successful for us in the past, and we're hopeful that will rebound as well.
Great.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, good. We can see. How do I advance? How do I advance slides? Oh, just say next. Okay. All right. Excuse me. My name is Ryan Phipps. I am with City Engineering, City of Colorado Springs, and I am here to present the 222 East Pikes Peak Avenue project. Really excited to be here this morning. But I will let you know this is an hour-long presentation that I'm going to try to get into about 10 minutes. So I'll try to move as quick as I can. And if you have any questions after we get through the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to explore any particular areas that you have interest in. So the 222 East Pikes Peak project, as you saw in the original packet that Gail presented, this is a P3 project, which means public-private partnership. We have 3 partners in this, and that is Mountain Metro Transit, the Parking Enterprise, and Norwood Development Group. I'm going to turn this over to Brian in just a moment to talk about transit, and then I'll get back up. I'll represent parking and the private interest, and then talk about how we're going to go about doing this project. But overall, what we're looking at is a very forward-thinking, multimodal transportation hub. This is a location, a building that will house really all transportation options that are available within the city of Colorado Springs. You'll hear primarily about the transit component, but this will also host all of our micro mobility options, which are, relatively new to downtown, the scooters and bikes. It will be within walking distance of many destinations in the core of downtown. It'll host vehicles, and then ultimately as front range Paso, or the front range rail, that's, this longtime vision of will come to fruition, there would be a way to connect to that as well. So this is really what we're talking about, is kind of a once in a generation type of facility that we can connect transportation in the region. At this point, I'll let Brian talk about transit's perspective, and then I'll get back up and talk about parking and private stuff.
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metropolitan Transit. So Jessica, if we could advance, please. Thank you. So, as I said a second ago, we've been at this for quite a while, and you've been hearing my updates over the last several years. But the 2016-2017 effort, where we looked at this, a new location for a new downtown transit center, that was the 8th attempt in about 18 years. And, now we're over 2 decades. So we've been at it for quite a while. But the 2016-2017 study, I was the project manager for that. We and the consultant team originally looked at 29 sites. And the graphic on the right shows you the project area that we looked at. For it to be a downtown transit center, it does have to be in downtown. So that was, one important criterion that we had to adhere to. But you'll see, I don't know if you can see this on your visuals here, but sites 8, 12, and 17 were the 3 sites that rose to the top, following the study, several screening processes. Those were the top 3 sites that came out of that. Site 17 is, the 2 blocks of Pueblo Avenue. Site 8 is at Saguache and Colorado Avenue. And then site 12 was just east of Nevada, north of Vermejo. Site 17, Pueblo Avenue, we kind of considered our public option. If the other private sites fell out, we were hopeful that Pueblo Avenue could be a good alternative. So following the recommendations of this study, the mayor then appointed a steering committee to look at prioritizing these 3 sites and then kind of focusing on one to move on. And that happened, end of 2017 into 2018. And the steering committee identified site 8 at Saguache and Colorado Avenue as the top ranked site. And that's when we began to negotiate with the property owner. And it kind of became clear early on that it was not going to be as feasible to negotiate, and could actually result in some risk to the city. So then in 2019, we moved on. We addressed council multiple times, and actually site number 2, which you see at the northeastern corner of Nevada and Pikes Peak. That's the yellow one in that graphic. That's kind of where we ended up today. So we're very, very hopeful and happy that Norwood Development Group has joined us in this partnership. So we feel really good about this. Jessica, next slide, please. So this is a close-up of the site. As I mentioned, northeastern corner of Nevada and Pikes Peak, the southern end of that block. The northeastern corner of that block is our city auditorium. And then just north of the property, there's Mountain Chalet, City Rock, Climbing Gym, and the new motel on the southeastern corner of Nevada and Kiowa. So that southern part of the block there that you see in yellow is the site that we're looking at now. Next slide, please. So this location, if you look at the graphic to the right, you'll see the yellow rectangle highlighted again. Shows you that we're in the center of everything good that's in downtown. Close to everything. pretty much catty corner from our existing transit terminal. So as we begin, hopefully begin construction on this new site, there will be little impact to our existing transit operations. And once we make the move to the site, again, very, very limited impact to our customers. The two graphics on the left, the North Nevada Transit Connectivity Study and the Downtown Shuttle Analysis. These are two really recent studies that we've done that heavily rely on a enhanced, newer, beautiful, great new facility to operate our transit center from. You know, we do have plans to implement bus rapid transit either on Nevada or Weber streets. And, you know, both the east and the west end of the new transit center will be right on Nevada and Weber. So that would line up perfectly with that new operation. And the downtown shuttle is something we're excited about. We'll be implementing that later this month. That will run on Tejon Street from Cache La Poudre in the north up around CC's Robeson Arena down to Rio Grande, down where the new South downtown development is happening, redevelopment, service to the Olympic Museum and Switchback Stadium and all the new redevelopment down there. So it's perfectly positioned for everything that's happening in downtown. Next slide, please. And these are some visuals of peer cities, peer transit agencies that we considered when we were doing our relocation study. You know, these are sites that are just multimodal in nature, serve multiple users, and are very iconic for those cities downtown. So we're looking at Detroit, Boise, Rochester, New York, and Denver. So that's Denver Union Station, and yeah, great multimodal space that we're looking for our new center, with space for our operations, the state's Mustang service, the Greyhound intercity service, transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, and really good bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. You know, so some of the we looked at programming, you know, what could actually be housed inside this new center. And, you know, one of the spaces that we thought would be very vital would to have a community space in there where we could hold public meetings, not only for, you know, service changes, but city could hold all of their public meetings in the site. So that's, you know, a possibility that could be implemented with this new site. Next slide, please. And finally, before I turn it over to Ryan again, these are some conceptual drawings that came out of some later work after the relocation study was done and kind of looking at the specifics of this new site. Something, you know, very similar to an airport terminal where you have, you know, waiting in a comfortable space and kind of like a gate situation where you exit the gates and go out and board your bus. Kind of an island centered concept where the waiting area is in the middle. The buses circulate around the island and, you know, have bus bays where they can pull in and out independently of each other. You'll see that the graphic to the lower right. We could have Mustang and Greyhound service out on Pikes Peak. We could have the BRT service on Weber and Nevada, as I mentioned earlier. And all of our other routes could circulate inside the facility around the island. And these are just some potential uses. You know, there could be commercial space down below, coffee shops, whatever, and entrance to the parking facility. And so that's where I'll leave it. And that's where Ryan will pick up to talk about one of our other partners, the city's parking enterprise.
Ryan Phipps, City Engineering, back up here again. So I'll be covering the parking enterprise portion here. We have 3 public parking garages within the city of Colorado Springs downtown. The top left one is the transit hub currently. And then you have the Cascade garage and then the North Nevada garage. or I guess it's South Nevada at that point. What you see there with the Kiowa garage and then the top left corner is a structure that's about 50, maybe a little over 50 years old, which for these types of buildings is its service life. And that's where we house our current downtown transportation hub or transit hub. And if Craig Blewett were here, one of the things he likes to just point out about it is that the only thing wrong with this is that it's not safe, efficient, or attractive. Otherwise, it works perfectly fine. So there's a lot of room to grow from what our current facility operates as. But I like the way that Craig brings that up, because that's almost as if we're setting the bar fairly low, because if we create a safe and efficient and somewhat attractive building, it still may not meet all the goals that this project has. What we're looking to do is create a structure that's well above and beyond that, something that entices usership, draws that in. With the on the previous slide or a couple slides ago, we had the shuttle document and the North Nevada, and what we're expecting over the course of the next several years or into the future as the city continues to develop and it grows out, it also densifies in the core, is that we're going to continue to get more users, maybe users of the transit system that haven't been current users. And so we're trying to create a structure here that is enticing to that type of user as well. A place that someone that's not typically using public transportation would feel comfortable and understand how to navigate around. So the public parking perspective is, yes, we have this structure at Kiowa. And so we'll be looking at 3 different alternatives. Basically, augment the Kiowa garage with some additional parking at this location at 222 Pikes Peak. We may replace it or augment and replace. So that's just how many cars are we going to be able to stack into this building. And we'll look at those different alternatives. Next slide, please. This is where parking gets creative, if parking can be creative, and that's adding color, using apps, using the navigation within the structure. I don't know if you visited other locations where you can drive down an aisle and you can look for the red and green lights and you can see if there's a stall down there that's open. It's a very simple technology, but it's super helpful and it helps you actually park and use the facility more effectively. So that's what we'll be looking to implement from the parking's perspective, is how do we make the user experience elevated over just a standard garage? How do we make this thing more enticing and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Intuitive. Next slide, please. So this public-private partnership is founded on the principle that we're building on private property, and our private property partner in this is the Norwood Development Group. So their component of this would be the commercial space that would live on this site. And currently we're thinking that it's probably above the transit and parking components. And so with that, we're going to look at several different options. We're going to look at an option that includes 2 office spaces. So because the site is a half-block area approximately, we'll look at 2 towers, each being an office. We'll look at maybe an office and a hotel combination, and then also office and residential. And so we will cycle through those options with our selected consultant for this project and work with Norwood Development Group. Jeff Finn of Norwood Development Group is here if you want to ask specific questions about that piece. But we'll look at what makes most sense to them as well in that. Next slide, please. This is a slide that just demonstrates some initial schematic of how we might stack and program the building, and also considering parking into the future. One of the things to consider is how many cars do we need 50 years from now? Is it going to be used the same way? And if cars are used differently, are we able to repurpose parking decks for other spaces? Next slide, please. So these 3 partners, the Mountain Metro Parking Enterprise and Norwood Development Group, have entered into a cooperation agreement, and that also includes the Colorado Springs Urban Renewal Authority, because we're on the city auditorium block, which is within an existing URA area. That That cooperation agreement outlines the intent of this project, roles and responsibilities of each of the parties, and then how we plan on phasing the project and moving forward. So go ahead, next slide, please. The cooperation agreement covers these first two phases that are in blue, the concept and schematic design. So that's in the world of design. That's basically where you look at all your alternatives and then you pick an alternative that you think works best for you and you kind of narrow it down. And then at that point, you can further develop it into construction ready plans. And so we'll be looking at those first two steps. We're going to look at what our options are, find out which option we like best, and then we'll develop around that. We expect that will take approximately a year. About this time next year, we hope to have a final conceptual design and also be working on what the next phases of the contractual agreement of the P3 arrangement will work under. There's a number of different ways that can work. But we'll have to get something more defined than what we currently have in order to progress through design development, construction documents, and then ultimately advertise the project as a single complete, building. That was my attempt to get through everything as quickly as possible. If you want to flip to the next slide, that's our final view of Pikes Peak in the city of Colorado Springs. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And we do have Jeff and Brian here also as other subject matter experts if there's something I can't answer.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a quick question. Have you gotten far enough along to get an idea of what a kind of elevation you're talking about and what kind of car parking capacity you're doing? And then I also didn't hear that maybe one of those towers would be retail.
So we just yesterday actually selected our consultant. So we haven't stepped into those first two phases that I talked about. We haven't developed a whole lot of ideas around that. And to clarify, one of the options was office and residential. So it was either office and like a hotel, or office and like apartments. Retail is a part of the overall commercial component. So probably on like the ground floor.
Yeah, this is a long time coming. I was on that original selection committee of the downtown thing. What'd you say it was, 2016? Yeah, so that was a good year-long plus study and looking at all those sites. So this is a long time coming to see that we finally worked out something and so good presentation. Thank you for the information. We look forward to hearing more. Yes, sir, Dave.
A great presentation. Dave, oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. A great presentation again. Thank you, Ryan. The good stuff in there. Help me understand the intermodal elements of this. I know that transit is very important. Parking is right there. Mixed use, retail, it's all great stuff. But with the front range rail, and I'm not saying I'm a big fan necessarily of the concept, but looking long-term, big picture, I was in a meeting this morning with CDOT. They're pushing very heavily still mobility hubs. You probably heard that term. Is now probably the hottest term in this state of Colorado when it comes to intermodal facilities like this. Help me understand, have you worked at all, looked at the intermodal nature of perhaps bringing rail service into here? How would that be? Where I'd like to see us not go, frankly, is to have a train depot, let's say at Giuseppe's or what was the old train depot downtown by the Antlers, and then have a bus depot not coordinated in location with this. To me, most of the very successful ones, Union Station is the best example. You've got the A line to the airport, you've got the passenger rail, you've got the bus thing. Everything is consolidated in a single location downtown Denver. And I think that's very effective. And that I guess is the concept I think that you've been trying to move toward. But I didn't hear you address any of the issues about heavy rail, light rail, other kinds of modalities here being blended in with this.
Yeah, let me give it a shot and then Brian can fill in some blanks. So the downtown transit hub, the bus hub, is needed. There's an urgency to it. We have certain federal funds that are associated with the project. There's capitalizing on the opportunity right now that exists within the economy, things of that nature. We can't just sit on our current garage at Kiowa until the passenger rail thing is figured out. That is my personal understanding and impression from all these discussions that I've been a part of. So we have like a responsibility for this particular transportation hub for the city. And then what happens with rail along the way is something that will happen in the future. We'll have to connect those two pieces. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Ideally, it would be like a Union Station type of thing, but I don't expect that that's the situation here in the Springs based upon where rail is and the need for this particular facility at this time.
But I would say that the original lot that Brian talked about, that wooden, was right there a block from the railroad tracks, and would have accommodated the rail much easier than it is sitting 5 blocks off the track. So
All of these sites require private cooperation. And my understanding of that other site that may have been more desirable for that did not get the type of cooperation necessary in order to move forward.
And so help me again understand, what's the urgency? And if it's a matter of timing, if we're 7 weeks or 7 months away from being able to firm something up with the Front Range Rail, and the CDOT is putting probably $250 million into mobility hubs, and tons of money would be available for Colorado Springs for a mobility hub specifically. Help me understand the urgency why you want to move forward at this point when we could be on the verge of a train decision and a massive mobility hub infusion of cash to offset a lot of that. What's the urgency to move forward today?
Maybe Brian can answer that more. I don't know. Can you? Okay.
Well, the urgency is, we've been trying to do this for over 2 decades. So we still have safety issues, we still have operational issues, and the aesthetics are pretty crummy where we are currently. So
fully agree.
we'd really like to be in a new
It stinks.
center. And as Ryan said also, we do have State Senate Bill 267 that are sitting, waiting for us to do something with a new downtown transit center. So we do need to move on this. From what I understand, the only mobility hub for this region is going to be in Fountain for now. But concurrently, the state is studying Front Range Passenger Rail, and they're studying the extension of Amtrak Southwest Chief from La Junta to Pueblo and here. And I'm also managing project manager of a rail station location study that we're doing now that's trying to figure out the more urgent need is for an Amtrak station. That's likely to happen much sooner than Front Range Passenger Rail. There's many studies, environmental work that still needs to be done. I believe the ballot item is going to the voters this fall as far as creating a taxing district to fund and operate that. So we're years away from anything with Front Range Passenger Rail, at least a decade. Amtrak could be a little bit sooner, like I mentioned. So we need to find a rail station now that could accommodate Amtrak service, but also accommodate future Front Range Passenger Rail. But things are just not lining up timing wise. We're desperate for a new downtown transit center, and we need that. But having rail connectivity would be great. I mentioned a new downtown shuttle that's starting later this month that could easily join wherever our rail station is to this new downtown transit center. It's going to have very frequent service, operate, many hours of each day. So that could be a great alternative. And that's one of the main criterion that we're looking at for identifying a site for a new rail station is how does it fit into our existing transit system? Can we accommodate it or serve it with our existing routes, or do we need to design a shuttle that meets the rail station customers, takes them to our system? So we're looking at all of that now, but it's a great idea if timing worked out. And actually we had private partners to put a rail station next to a new downtown transit center. We would probably do that, but as Ryan mentioned, that's one of the hardest things is getting a private property owner that's willing to coordinate and cooperate and collaborate with us. And that's why we've had no success for over 2 decades.
So, Mr. Chair, is this for information only or is this for action and approval?
No, my understanding was information only at this point, as a response. There's no PPRTA funds at this moment being requested for this one.
Yeah, this is the courtesy update to bring you up to speed. Yeah.
I have a question, Brian, or.
Sure.
You mentioned that the building could be modified later if needed. You know, is that the parking deck? Something like that.
Yeah, I might need Jeff's help, but yeah, when you consider what the future use of a building may be, if we didn't need as many cars to be parked in there, how could we repurpose those floors? So some parking garages have the slanted floors and they're ramped up to get to the top. Well, that doesn't work too well if you're going to turn it into an office. You'd slide into the edge of your cubicle, right? So you kind of need flat floors. You need certain ceiling heights, things of that nature. So just considering those things to make the building continue to be useful into the future.
Well, I think that's a good idea because like you both said, we don't really know the future. Available. This may be great for who knows how long. It have to be converted.
Yeah, we have to be able to adapt. Yeah.
Okay. Any other pertinent questions? Thank you guys, all of you, for taking the time. Thanks for Norwood being part of this, and thanks for the update on what's going on.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
I have
Mike.
another question for
Mike.
Brian.
Mike,
For Brian.
use your mic.
Oh, I thought I had some. There we go. Brian, I've noticed within the last month, and this also may relate with the city of Colorado Springs, is on East Platte Avenue, just east of Circle. They've gone in there on both sides of Platte and put in some nice real bus stands, you know, for people to get out of the weather, you know, waiting for the bus ride. I have to say, those are really nice work and nice stands. Do you have future plans to continue the process of installing those throughout the city on a lot of the routes?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have several funding programs, both through the PPRTA, but also we do get grants through PPACG, federal grants to improve our bus stops. So whether it's, you know, putting in shelters or benches, but yeah, we do have kind of an ongoing program to enhance our bus stops and bus shelters.
Like I say, those two there on East Platte, they just finished those up in the last week or two, and those are really nice for the customers. Both I've come in the last week several times, and both times, you know, you've got customers on both sides sitting in those bus stops, out of the weather, you know, waiting for their bus rides. So
Great.
I think that adds also to the ability to, you know, for people to be encouraged to use the bus, you know, compared to some of the old bus stops around the city.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, let's, thanks, guys. Let's move on to item 7B, PPRTA capital project list. What I'd like to maybe suggest is, being that the majority of the discussion is going to center with the city and the county, let's maybe hit the Rama, Green Mountain Falls, Calhoun, and Manitou first, and get those done and out of the way before we start. So could we just maybe do this presentation and backwards from the look, if it's, I think it'd be easier for them with the presentation just to start at the back and roll forward. So we'll go with Rama first. So Cindy, can you guys talk to Rama? And you can do Calhoun too, I guess, if you want.
Yep. we can do that. So if you're ready, Ramus is pretty easy. Our A list, we had a lot of discussion. We don't have a lot of money, but we have some probably low dollar improvements. That first one, we have a brush dump in town that all of our residents use. We offer free to dump limbs, branches, grass, but the road to it is in bad shape. So we want to improve it. Probably just gravel. We're not looking to pave it. So that's why we can afford it under this. The other item is actually going to be brought up. Rick and I talked about this. It's going to be brought up at the board meeting, the PPRTA. Not really sure if it's an allowed because we're building a new sewer plant. So we have a 40-acre lot. We want to put a road to the actual plant, but because it's not a public road, but it is going to a utility. I mean, Rick and I kind of talked about this, reading the RTA rules, it looks like it might be allowed, but Jennifer Ivy wanted to talk to the board about it. So that one may change, but it's there for now. And then the B project would be curb and gutter. Do you guys have questions?
Don't see any hands raised or anybody here in the room. Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks.
All right, how about, who's next? Green Mountain Falls.
Good afternoon, everyone. Becky Frank, Town of Green Mountain Falls. You have in your packet the proposed projects that were identified by the town and approved at our August 3rd, 2021 board meeting. They include the El Paso Trail and Iona Avenue road improvements, the El Paso Avenue bridge replacement, Belvedere Avenue improvements, Ute Pass improvements, roadway drainage and plan and improvements, intersection improvements, roadway safety and traffic operations, and bridge improvements. Those are all pretty vague concepts currently. We are working with our engineer to better refine those, and we'll have an update or a revised list at our next opportunity.
Becky, I've got a question on what are your general thoughts that you're working in terms of Ute Pass improvements, being that Highway 24 is a CDOT highway? What are your general thoughts on when you say Ute Pass improvements?
Oh yeah, it would definitely probably be our downtown corridor and our streets. That it's our main access on both ends of town.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Green Mountain Falls? All right, let's go to Callahan.
Okay, Cindy again. So what we looked at for our A list is our main drag is 8th Street. It goes from one end of town to the other. Looking at the dollars, we feel we can do from Boulder to Colorado Avenue. We want to do the whole repave, water, sewer, all of that. And then our list B, we have 8th Street that's about 2 long blocks and it's just in bad shape. So we want to just repave. We have no utilities there, which is why the money is not as high. So we can afford it on list B.
Okay.
All right, any
Rick?
questions?
Rick?
Just one quick one. I was a little surprised that the list was so small. I mean, we're talking about 10 years of money. And like the Brush Road, the Brush Dump Road, and new sewer plant road, curb and gutter, that's not very much for 10 years.
But so the ones you're talking about for Rama, our A list, we only have over $100,000. So no, it's not, but we just don't have very much money there. Here in Calhan, we actually, it's been a couple years now, but we did a rehab of only a block, water and sewer, and just the cost, honestly, that was over 200,000. So we're estimating our 800,000 estimate for Calhan will do 3 blocks. So that's why it's short, is because that's our main need. And to just do 1 block is really not cost effective. So we decided to use all of it to do 3 blocks.
Okay, I just didn't, I guess I said 10 years. That's gonna be some money and not very much to get done in 10 years.
But we
So-
did have the same issue in Rama. We had 1 project, and yes, we got it done actually with the help of El Paso. But with the amount of money we're talking, we just can't do a long list.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay, thanks.
mhm.
Any other questions on Calhan, Rama, or Green Mountain Falls? Okay, let's move on to Manitou Springs.
Hi there. I'm Dolger Benick, city engineer for Manitou Springs, and we basically created programs for both of our lists to include many needs that our community needs, as you can see there in those 2 bulleted items.
This is Cindy. I just have a question. Do you not have any specific projects to put on the A list? It's just seems to be very broad, and I wondered, you know, you have roadway reconstruction. Are there roads that you could list?
Yeah, Sydney, it's a good question. And just like all of the small communities, our needs are changing so quickly. And we have the real benefit to us in this is that there's a lot of grant opportunities out there that we tend to use PPRTA funds as our local match. And so we obviously don't know yet what grants not only will we apply for, but what we'll get. And so this gives us the flexibility to be dynamic, but also to adjust to those grants when we do apply and when we hopefully receive them.
I was going to ask the same question, Cindy, so thank you.
Now, as a community, internally, we do have our own lists that we plan to use the PPRTA capital improvement funds for, but you know that's decided on kind of as a Manitou Springs resident, in conjunction with Public Works.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
You brought it. Yeah, I have to kind of just reiterate the concerns here. You know, we always make this distinction between, and this is Carlos Pettis, by the way, CAC member here. I appreciate the information here, but you know, we do have, you know, projects, and then we also have programs. Programs are more open-ended. We're seeing this as a project with this, you know, it's not specific. One of the questions that I know our board always asks, how do we know we're done, you know, with this project? And the way it's phrased here, it looks as though it's not really a project that with a start and an end. It's more of a program. So I don't know if maybe, you know, go back and look at this, maybe clarify that. But in my mind, I just see this as more of a program rather than a project that's open-ended. And I just wanted to just make that very clear when the board asks this question, what is this? You know, we have a, you know, a response for that. That's just
Sure.
Again, a general comment.
And everyone is absolutely correct. We definitely are approaching these as programs. And, you know, when is for a program that has a continuous source of funds for a period of time, I think we would look at that as being done by, you know, efficiently and to the betterment of the community, spending the allocations or, you know, funding bigger projects annually, and then not carrying over a bunch of money every year is kind of how we would measure our progress. It wouldn't be so much that we finished project A, it would be that we are continuously meeting the goals and expectations of PPRTA and the taxpayers that voted for it.
Yeah, but see, the challenge comes in the requirement that all A-list projects must be fully funded prior to going to a B-list project. And with a program Now, what the city has done over the last couple of years is within some of their programs, they have listed their goals for that program and the projects that they are projecting to be funded by that program fund. But I think that what you're saying is that it's an ongoing thing. I think that would be very important to be able to say that in year one, our goal for that program fund would be A through or 1 through 4.
Yeah, Ruxton, Manitou Avenue.
Or something. So there's some specifics there that are outlined so that when we get near the end of this 10-year period, or we get to the projected time where we're going to jump to the B-list projects, going into those budget years, you can say we're doing project 10 through 14, and 14 is our last projected A-list project for this program fund. I think that level of detail would be necessary, I think, to be able to make a determination to the public, to the voters, that we have a plan, or you have a plan, and this is not just a pot of money that we're going to decide what to do with. There is a plan, there are projected projects, and that be transparent to the voters and available so that we can make that projected termination of A-list project before we go to B. I think that's where a sticking point is. It certainly was with me, that because I had the same concern.
Well, I guess the question would be then, would having a program only prohibit the transition to the B list?
Well, we're opening up Pandora's box to the other people that have it. If we don't, I think that our commitment to the voters were that we have to show that everything on the A-list project is projected in our budget, it's funded, and that's the criteria before we can, anybody, not just one person, but anybody can go to the B list. And so that's where I see the sticking point with just having program funds. There may have to be some criteria laid out that says that you've got to be more specific on a year-to-year funded basis or something, but that's where my concern, and I'm seeing nods in the room, but I think a lot of people there.
But the other flip side of that is by, let's say that things go really well for the A list, and by year 8 or 9, we're wanting to transition to the B list. There would be, Manitou would have evidence and proof of 8 years of successfully implementing, RTA dollars within the community as well.
Oh, there's no problem with that. I think it's just, we've got to make sure that we're following the rules in the IGAs and the stuff that are accounted for. So that's the challenge, I think. Just a minute, Richard.
Could I make a comment?
Ann had a comment first.
I don't know if maybe the rules don't provide for this, but sounds like Manitou wants more like what you call a block grant. And they get to decide in their little town with their local people what would be best as they pursue these all worthy goals. But they aren't listing each one, because in an old town like Manitou, you never know what's going to pop up. That's kind of my idea. They have to be so flexible. So,
Richard?
I am really troubled by the report from Manitou Springs. It's a great community and a real major part. It's an enjoyable place for me to visit, and I really love the place. I admire the smaller jurisdictions presentations. They're very, very limited in the amount of money they have. And they have come forth and said exactly where they were going to spend it. And I commend them for that. I'm sure it was not an easy choice, and it's just not much money. And that's the hardest part of all. And I don't know the amount, probably should, but I don't know how much Manitou is getting. But they need to do the exact same thing that the smaller cities have done. If we are supposed to recommend approval of the submissions today, I will seek to amend any motion to approve the total by having an exception for Manitou Springs. They need to make some decisions and list them in an identifiable program of construction or maintenance or whatever. And this is not it. Look at what the smaller communities have done and come up with something like that if necessary. But it does look like not that all of the things said are basically legitimate and good projects, but we don't know what the hell they are. And I'll be damned if I'm going to vote to support it. And I hate to say that because it's a great community. Thank you.
Okay. Who is Larry? Go ahead.
I just like to make a comment is that in looking at Manitou Springs' letter, if you look at their first bullet item, the A project list, and their second bullet item, B projects, the wording is exactly the same. Does not tell me a thing as far as, what possibly they could be using. Yes, I understand you're looking at, getting grants in that, but that can also be still entailed in a project list saying that, we need to reconstruct the sewer line across Manitou Avenue or something of that nature, to where the A list and the B list are a little bit more specific without having the exact same wording on both the A project list and the B project list.
Okay, Dave, were you next? I was looking down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and thanks, Mr. Chair. Dole, you've done a great job. I know turning things around in Manitou. There's so many enhancements you folks are doing. I know you've got a long list of great CIP projects. The sense I have from the board here is the board is probably going to be reluctant to move forward with this list without some more specificity. And so I guess the question I have really, Mr. Chair, if I'm drawing that conclusion prematurely, please let me know. What would the process be, Dole, Mr. Chair, Rick, for just revising this and bring us back a list of, it doesn't have to be a very long list, but add some specificity to it. What's the process and timing? Can Dole still do that and be successful?
I guess I should have started this whole conversation with this is the first of several meetings on the iterations of these list of projects. So the answer to that is yes.
Because we all want to see Dole succeed, obviously.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's no question there. It's just a matter of, in my opinion, of adhering to the rules that are in the IGA, the guidelines that we have, and our responsibility as the Citizens Advisory Committee to provide that community oversight of the program, and that we're consistent with that across all the members. And so that's a big concern that I have in that. So, all right. So
Can I ask a quick question?
yeah, go ahead, Dole.
I appreciate the discussion. Are we in fact in violation of the agreement by doing this?
No, it's just a matter of, I think from our perspective, over the years, we've had concerns with programs that were undefined, program funds that were undefined. And the other question, from my perspective, I'm not going to speak for any of the others that have mentioned it, my perspective is your success at the board. And we want to make sure that we're supporting you and your goals at the board. I think they're going to have some challenges with this based on my experience with the board. So,
because, you know, to the point, we love our community as well. And
Oh, yeah.
so we were as excited about this as a program as, you know, it was said earlier that we are in a weird place where we're not small, tiny like Calhan is, where they can put curb and gutter in and that's their project. I mean, we get about 600 to 700,000. Well, it's going to increase, you know, with the cost of growth, with the growth. You know, we anticipate on average getting about $650,000 a year in capital improvement money through PPRTA. And, you know, managed well, that can make a significant difference in a community like ours. So, you know, we're really excited about that and have lots of visions for it internally. And I think everyone's point is share some of that here. And as you all are aware, the downside is because we are small and we are under a lot of different kind of influences, you know, by listing out those projects, it starts to obligate us. And if we want to go in a different direction because of whatever variables may present themselves, because of a grant that came up, for example, we're bound to the A-list projects.
yeah.
So
good
that's
point.
really that may not change your guys' feeling on things, but that was really our logic and motivation behind this.
Good point. Good point. Craig?
Yeah, I guess I don't feel like we're piling on here though. But the one thing that comes to my mind is that we need to obviously keep in mind what the purpose of this list is, and that's to encourage the approval of PPRTA 3. And something that is kind of non-specific like this, I think voters in general will find that less exciting than a specific list of projects. And I can say, yes, I can see that that's something Manitou Springs could do, and they'd be more likely to sign off on something like that.
So one of the ways we thought to try to address that is that we would make available on our website our potential capital improvement list that could be eligible for RTA funding. So to communicate to the taxpayer accordingly, hey, if you want to know what projects Manitou's potentially earmarking RTA funds, here's our 5-year capital improvement list.
Okay.
Okay, I guess one question I have, Jim, is why can't you just include that in your A and B list then? Same thing, you're saying you've got a list, so why not just include it in your A list and B list?
It's a great question. And because these are 2025 funds, so that would be 2025 through 2030. And as a small community that's catching up with backlogged work, it's not as well defined yet as we would like it to be.
Okay.
But
Ed, I'm sorry, Doyle, I'm finished.
Yeah, what I was going to bring up is on the cover of our report, promises made, promises kept. And I think to maintain the integrity with the voters, which is critical because we've taken these projects to voters before, is you have to outline and give them something to look at that's tangible, that they can say, hey, this is what we voted for, this is what has happened. If we go in with vagueness, they don't know what's happened, and I'm afraid it's going to be more difficult to get the votes in.
Yeah, just a risk. And Rick, do you want to say anything?
2 or 3 comments. Number one, yes, this is the first of 3 reviews on the capital list. So June and July at a minimum. So that's it's designed that way on purpose to be able to have feedback and comments and allow member governments to revise their list and bring it back in June and July. Number 2, on Dole's question about whether or not a program fund can be declared fully funded. We've never crossed that threshold yet. In PPRTA 1, we never made it to PPRTA 2. In PPRTA 2, we may or may not get to the B list, from the A list to the B list. I might have misspoken there. Let me back up. In PPRTA 1, I don't think we ever got from the A list to the B list. In PPRTA 2, we may or may not get to the B list. But let's hypothetically say in 2023 or 2024,
we thought we could get to the B list. City has about 10 program funds in PPRTA 2. So how would that work? I'm just thinking out loud, help me think out loud. If all of the named projects were ready in the A list were ready, were fully funded and declared fully funded, and we haven't defined what fully funded is yet. That's on our to-do list. What would be the case with the city's 10 program funds in PPRTA 2? I think that the CAC and the board could just declare that the city's 10 program funds were fully funded. So I think to answer Dole's question, he was asking if Manitou's single program fund could hold up everybody else moving from an A to a B. I think the answer is no. Just like hypothetically with the City of Colorado Springs 10 program funds, I think there would just have to be a declaration that they were fully funded. So I think with Manitou's single program fund in an A list, that could be just a declaration that it was fully funded and they're done. So then then Manitou's A program fund would not be holding up everybody else to move to the B list.
Yeah, a good point, and a good analogy, because we're going to face that issue coming in, but we're going to face that issue, I think, with RTA too. Gail, did you want?
Well, as a representative of the said program funds, I wanted to let you know there is some strategy behind what we've had in the past and what you'd see going into RTA 3. But I would 100% agree with what Rick said. The bottom line is in a program fund, the board can declare when that's done, right? Based on the funding and appropriations, and then the body of the work that the city performs, and that's the work that was performed underneath that program. But on some of the programs we have in RTA 2, and we've definitely been looking at this at RTA 3, we have what we refer to as phase 1 and phase 2. So when we're done with the named capital projects, we're gonna self-declare that the phase 1 projects are fully funded, but activities underneath that program fund is fully funded, and move on to phase 2. If that makes sense. So there's a strategy to have some continuity because there's such a dependency and need for those program funds, at least from the city's perspective.
So I would normally agree, but for the fact that the wording is identical.
And the wording's identical in mine, except they say phase 1 and phase 2. What I would recommend, and I'm more than happy to work with Joel on this, that his program fund may want to be a street infrastructure program improvements or something along that lines. And then the description includes all these ancillary activities that could be included in there.
Yeah.
And have the phase 1 and phase 2 going in the A list and the B list.
Problem solved.
So I don't think this is a problem from the body of work he wants to do, but I think it needs to be packaged maybe a little bit differently, and I'd be happy to help him do that.
Yeah, I agree with, that's a great suggestion. And I agree with Dole is that, you do need that flexibility, and that's the advantage of a program fund. If something does come up that maybe you didn't anticipate now, and because we're looking at things 8, 10, 12 years out, that flexibility is required. And so we'll work through this. Rick had one more comment.
I guess just a word of caution to all. If any member government is moved to state an A-list project that then cannot be done, then that holds up everybody to get to the B list. So in encouraging Dole to have some specificity, it would have to be something that they absolutely want to do. If it's only a 50-50 odds that they will get it, that they even want to do it in the 10-year period, and then they decide they don't want to do it, but it's listed, then nobody can get to the B list. So there's a danger in forcing
unnecessary specificity, even though this is as generalized as you can get. But if there's forced specificity and an A-list project then is not done in year 8 or 9, then nobody can get to the B list.
Carlos?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. Carlos Pettis here. Yeah, just to refresh my memory on this. I know we've gone back and forth on this, but if a member of government had completed their A list, finished it up, but another member of government still have not fully funded their A list, was still there going to be some sort of options like we do with our bridge funds to pull things off the B list and promote it up to the A list? Are we still locked in where all member governments have to finish their A list? Is that still thinking today?
Yes.
Were we planning, was there going to be any suggestions on amending the IGAs or the ballot measures so that is not a hard, fast restriction on our member governments? Because there was some discussion of that. I just had not, I don't remember specifically what we had decided there, what the thinking is.
Gail was maintaining the list, so.
Yeah, as you recall, we went through this topic many times with the matrix, and the decision was made not to have a provision for individual member governments to move to the B list. And there would be some concern too if there were too many projects, like for example, if Dole had, I'm just going to make up a number, a dozen projects, they put them on the A list and they all ended up costing way more than what the planned allocation would be. I think there would actually be some consternation from some of the other member governments as well, as that kind of held the other projects hostage or held the ability to move to the B list hostage. So we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past, and I understand we're just looking for a refresh, but I guess bottom line, the answer is no.
Okay. Okay, good discussion. Go ahead, Dole.
Sorry, last point, and I can very much appreciate the perception and how we present this information to the taxpayer, because you all have worked for almost 20 years to build respect and kind of the pride of our community for the RTA. And I do know that in Manitou, we are so grateful for the RTA funds. I mean, it has allowed and partnered with us to do so many of these projects that would not normally have been available. And so, from a Manitou resident perspective, they are in big support and big fans of this opportunity for us. So at least internally in our little city limits, we are real excited about this. Now, how that communicates outside of our city limits, I can very much respect the hesitation or concern about that.
Okay. All right. Good discussion, good points. This is first iteration, so we'll work through this. I think this is solvable, it's workable, and we're here to support the member governments accomplish their goals, not to try to be a roadblock in the system. So, all right. So
well, I'll make some revisions and I'll bring it back.
Okay, and just work with Rick and you're not new to this situation, just a new job title. So congratulations, by the way. So next, Jennifer, do you want to do county? Yes, no.
I think I still work there. Yes. Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County, county engineer. I put together a memo with mine. So I just want to do a brief presentation. We've put together this proposed list through some extensive process internally. We've had some feedback from our Highway Advisory Committee as well. And so just wanted to provide you the first glimpse at our projects. As you know, we have a consultant that is doing the project estimates for us. And so at this point, we don't have all of our to and from endpoints on these because some of that will be determined by those cost estimates. And then how the projects land as far as how many we end up with on the A list versus the B list will be really determined based upon those cost estimates. But this is the best list that we have at this point. And so unique to the county, in the past, we have not had any programs, but we do have 3 specific programs that we have proposed for the county. And so I'll just kind of go through those. Our El Paso County Safety and Multimodal Program. And this would be able to be identified for capital items for safety, multimodal, ADA, emergency repairs, and intersection projects. It's pretty broad, and as well as some of the other ones. So just our major road and reconstruction program. What that would include is improved surfaces. So for example, if we needed to convert a gravel road to pave, that would be included in that. Update to current engineering standards. Essentially, you know, if we needed to do a project to add curb and gutter or add lanes, or add additional capital items on a roadway. So for example, being able to address site distance issues or anything like that. And then also capitalized maintenance. So really, if we have a road that is beyond just your regular maintenance and we're not really anticipating to do significant widening or anything like that. So it may be a road that's just beyond maintenance, your simple maintenance, and we need to reconstruct it. That would be something that we would do under that program. And then pre-construction funding. One of the things that we want to be able to do is, you know, if we have some project that is maybe not on the named list, but we want to get a project going. For example, for the next portion of the PPRTA, if it's looked at reauthorized again, or if we can get a project that's shovel ready to then go for some federal funding and then be able to do that project. That's a project that a program that we want to be able to include. So that's really what that is. And then we have our other named projects, and I'm not going to go through them all. We provided a general map that showed those areas. And again, I just want to caution because we are going through the cost estimates right now, and we will be looking at these A-list projects. We'll be looking at, you know, if we cost out those projects and there's additional funding, then we would look at moving up some of those A or B-list projects. Or if as through the process, we have somebody that says, you know, you really missed the boat and missed a project, we'll be looking at that as well and looking at whether we should add that as a project as well. So this is really our first cut, and I would appreciate any input.
I was just a little surprised that you had Black Forest from Old Ranch north to Shoup on a B list. I would have expected that on an A list.
I want it on the A list. There's just only so much funding on that list. We were really trying to identify, you know, some of those projects that are really higher or lower. It's just a fiscally constrained. There's several projects that I want on the A list too that are not on our A list today.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hang on just a minute. I think Dave was first.
A great presentation, Jen, as always. A quick question. So number one on the list, I am delighted to see is Baptist Road. Is that number one just happens to be a numerical assignment, or is that the number one priority?
So these are not prioritized in any way. And number one is just to be able to identify the project number.
Okay.
And you'll see on the map, I do have the commissioner districts. That's really just for their information. We were just trying to choose the projects based upon the need, not really. Of course, we want to make sure that we look at projects all over the county and we're not leaving a section of the county out. But as you'll look at it, one of the things you'll see on there is that there's not a lot in Commissioner District 3 and 5. That is because that Commissioner District is in the city primarily. And so a lot of the projects that are in that Commissioner District are going to be covered by the city's list. So I just want to, I mean, I know it's off to the left. We have it, it's shown on the Commissioner District, but that really was more for their information so that they could easily look and see what's going on in their district.
Again, great list of one related comment. I did have a phone call from a monument area constituent who wanted to highlight, maybe we already heard from an individual there about a water pipe in Baptist Road. The timing of this would need to be just coordinated simply. They were the three scenarios are out there as he was explaining them. Two of them are bad. That the water pipe goes in and you got to tear it out and move it. The road goes in and you got to tear it out and move it. Or ideally, of course, you're going to coordinate Baptist Road with the installation of the very large water main building east to west. So just a little flag for you on that one. But otherwise, it's a great list. I'd like to see you go forward with it.
Larry?
I have a question. Actually, this is probably for Gail and Jennifer both. You've got an item joint with Colorado Springs, Powers Boulevard Extension, State Highway 83 to Voyager Parkway. Isn't that the responsibility of the developer for that project? When that area was annexed into the city of Colorado Springs, wasn't the developer responsible for building that road from 83 all the way to I-25?
So
He has now finished the I-25 to Voyager Park.
yeah, so Gail Sturdom at City Colorado Springs. So this, I get asked this question all the time, so I'll do my best to answer. So there was a couple different annexation agreements or packages of annexation agreements that happened in that area. Once we really related to the Northgate annexations and then for Flying Horse. Flying Horse's contribution to that, and that's the big piece that's really missing really from Voyager after Interquest. Their portion of that was primarily related to the right-of-way. So there are some funds that are available to it, and what we would be combining is those available developer funds with funds from both the city and county to complete the construction of that road. Because it is considered a regional attribute, and they, before Jennifer and I think both were really involved in it, it was determined that that was their portion or their share of the construction of that road.
Okay, thank you.
I got one quick question, then come to Rick. On the projects that are on both of your list, listed as joint projects, the county's carrying some and you're carrying some. Do we have them on both lists? Or is it going to be kind of like West Colorado Avenue where there is a lead and then at some point, I'm just trying to think about funds allocation and in part of your allotment. Is it, how do you include in your budget estimates your cost of a joint project so that it's part of your consideration? That, I guess that's where I'm going.
So Gail Sturdom, City of Colorado Springs. So the joint projects, even though we're individually sharing them with you in the prioritization, how we feel that it might even be a little different. How they're presented on the ballot, any joint projects or regional collaborative projects come first on the ballot. So happens, for those of you interested, Mark Shuffle Road will be #1 on the ballot, if you're curious to know how that would play out. And then there would be 4 or 6, depending on how the decision goes with the fiscal constraints for those regional collaborative projects under the A list. And then it will go to the rest of the A list projects named in alphabetical order. And how it's presented, it may or may not have who's leading it. But really what we've been working on collaboratively and also with Manitou Springs, because they can be involved in one of those joint projects as well, is how we divided up responsibility and even funding in the future. So for example, Mark Shuffle Road, the city is going to be taking the lead on that road. The intent would be to have funding for both the city and county, but the county's portion of that is equivalent to what the city's portion would be equivalent to improvements in that Stapleton Briargate area. So the county is going to lead that Stapleton Briargate project and fund it entirely. The city's going to do the same thing with Mark Shuffle, lead it and fund that entirely. The Powers North extension and the Powers South extension, which is just for engineering and right-of-way services, we're really looking at splitting those funds really at a 70-30 split based on what it is. And then on the north piece, what comes in for developer contributions and participation in that, and potentially some participation from CDOT as well. We're actually even hoping on the south piece, and Jennifer may want to talk about it too, about donations for right-of-way as development or annexations come in place. So
I was just making sure, saw only one of you had it listed, and I knew you collaborated and worked on those joint projects.
We both have them listed, actually.
Okay,
I think that how the lists were sorted, mine were sorted pure by alphabetical order and where it falls on which list now.
okay.
And Jennifer made a point of putting those regional collaborative projects up front and then the rest. of the
My oversight
projects.
then, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's
Thank you.
okay.
First mistake I've
And I
made
would
this
say,
year.
Jim, too, that's something that we're gonna be working on as time goes along is working to combine these lists because in the end, the list that I believe that the board will approve is a single list. That's kind of what we did last time. We still need to work on that and talk about that, but that's certainly what it is. I put mine on the top because I think to me that those are commitments that kind of come off the top for us. And so
Sure.
then for me, then I have to look at my quote unquote leftover money to then look at how I allocate then my A and B list projects. So it's just a formatting thing for me as far as ease of looking at the projects and how we're kind of doing that. I also want to point out on the county's project list, we do have a project that is actually in this town of Calhan. We included North Calhan Highway from US 24 to Paint Mine Road. That has right of way in both the town of Calhan and also unincorporated El Paso County. As we looked at how much money that the town of Calhan gets, I mean, it really made sense for us to really lead that project and do the entire project and not ask for a contribution from the town of Calhan. Except for, I know that, they have committed to help from a staff's standpoint of supporting that and also for helping us with possible right-of-way donations and any other support that they can provide. I know that I went out and looked at the road with their public works director and I've also talked to Cindy and we have a great partnership with the town of Calhan and we expect to continue that.
Okay. Rick?
I don't have an answer to this. I'm just raising the question.
Thanks. You're another Dave?
In the seventh, Jennifer, in your seventh project, which is a joint project, Woodman Road widening. My question is the word widening worth putting elsewhere in other projects where or not? Again, I don't have the answer to the question. In Powers North Extension, the South Powers Extension is pretty self-explanatory, but where it's a widening, I'm just wondering if it's worth an extra word. Just a question.
Yeah, and I think as we continue to work through the projects, that's kind of getting down to that is part of what we have to look at is how we name the projects, especially, for example, I have one project that I would love to do 4 lanes the entire way through, to do an improvement. It may be just doing a 2-lane and then leaving room for the 3rd and 4th lane for a next phase. So that's part of what we're looking at with our funding. But I definitely think I appreciate that. And that's good comment and stuff for, I think, probably all the jurisdictions to look at is how we're naming those projects.
And some of them you may desire to have a widening, but it maybe it financially doesn't end up in year 7, 8, 9. So you just do accel lanes, detail lanes, bike lanes, turn lanes.
Yep.
So it might be improvements, but not widening. So anyway, just thinking out loud.
Rick, just along those same lines, I hadn't thought about it, but I am frankly so afraid of the state's attitude about
greenhouse gases.
Restrictions on what that we can improve for more traffic. I'm almost afraid to put widening anywhere if we can come up with another word.
Okay, can we talk specifically about widening Woodman Road? Woodman Road, for at least from Jennifer Mai's perspective, and was not actually going to be on the PPRTA list at all. And let me tell you, because I currently have, well, we did this jointly, have STB Metro or the federal funding that the state wants to regulate with the greenhouse gas regulations for the engineering and for the first phase of construction of those improvements. Like you, we're also concerned what the future may look like. So we keep going back and forth, whether it's going to be on the A or B list, honestly, with where things are right now. But we want to have some options, but as it's written, it is a widening. As it's written in other grants and dollars, it's actually written, it's a widening. But your point is 100% taken on that item.
And I had highlighted that I-24 Woodman study that could change the designation of Woodman to a state highway or something. If that becomes a corridor, a east-west connecting corridor, and you widen it and you get the volume flow. If they change the designation of 24 and bring it up and came across, I don't know what's going to come out of that study, but anyway, Rick.
Richard raised a good point, the greenhouse gas issue and those regs. So just leaving it silent or saying improvements or not saying. So now I'm arguing against the word widening just because of the state law, state regs, CDOT and greenhouse gas. So again, I don't have an answer. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yep.
Just to confirm Richard's point, I think is excellent. And I was, again, part of, I think, Rick, I shared with you the CDOT greenhouse gas meeting that happened just this morning on this. I would concur 100% if we can, to the extent to which we can reduce the visibility of the words widening.
Yes.
Or do not use capacity enhancements
Yes,
unless
exactly.
absolutely necessary. Those are the two red flag buzzwords we want to avoid using for those reasons. But I like the word improvements or something similar. You can wordsmith it there, but don't raise any flags needlessly by using any of those words.
Second that. Yeah. Good. Okay. Any other questions for Jennifer? All right, Ms. Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the CAC. So the City of Colorado Springs is presenting our latest draft of the PPRTA 3 project list for project and program list for your consideration. One of the things that's not included in your memo or in the packet, I just want to give you a brief background on how the city developed their list. I think you all are aware, the city's been going through the transportation master plan update for the last year and a half, closer to actually 2 years. Through this referred to as Connect COS. And out of that effort, projects have started to emerge that have come out. And so the subset of those Connect COS projects, because that's looking at a 20-year horizon, was handed over to staff to look at for PPRTA 3 consideration. Staff did take that to the city's Citizen Transportation Advisory Board and worked with them on that list, both in the development of Connect COS and then in the list where they provided scoring and that turned into ranking. And that was given back to staff, and staff added things that the CTAB did not necessarily have the information given to them for that. Let me back up. CTAB actually scored the project based on the 6 measurable goals outlined in Connect COS. So they didn't have some additional information staff had. For example, citizen inquiries, regional growth, economic development, eminent safety concerns or issues, regional collaboration, looking at the overall effectiveness of PPRTA dollars and having the greatest number of greatest impact on the greatest number of citizens. So staff also provided a ranking, and it really gave us the first blush in our list. The city did take this list to the city council for an informal endorsement of March of 2022. And again, all this work thus far has not been fiscally constrained whatsoever. So that's a big caveat. So then we've continued to refine the list. So what you see here is just is slightly different than what city council saw. And really what the main changes are, the city has actually worked really hard on going through and cleaning up the names to appropriate engineering technical naming conventions, one. And we have been cognizant of the widening. We do have a couple other projects that do hit widening. Black Forest Road, the 2 other segments of that, one from Research and Briargate Parkway and Briargate to Old Ranch Road. And I know Jennifer has Old Ranch Road further north on her list. The Fillmore segment from the bridges for Monument Creek to Cascade is also widening is included in that or in that project description. But for the most part, projects that are likely going to be in the A list are not going to have widening on it, with the exception of potentially Woodman Road. We already talked a little bit about the strategy on that and why it may have to be on the RTA list at all. You'll also see our list, like Jennifer's, is presented in an A, B, and a B list fashion. The A list are projects that we feel strongly that it's very important for the city to get funded. They may or may not meet the fiscal constraint cutoff. We hope that they all do. The A/B list are projects, again, we still feel very strongly that we would like them to meet the fiscal constraints, but likely that there's in jeopardy of not making it. And then there's the B list. And those are projects right now we're very comfortable with staying on the B list, knowing that they're important to be carried for, important for our community and for our region. But right now they're just not in that top tier of priorities to get done. You will see that we also are looking at splitting a couple projects as well, and having the engineering or engineering and right-of-way function in the A list and the construction in the B list. And we're looking at that, and we're still looking at some of our other projects too for to strategize on that particular aspect. Because if we can demonstrate a better project readiness or shovel ready, depending on how it's defined with different funding opportunities, the further along we are on it, the better our chances can be for that, even though we don't get credit any longer for the money we've already contributed when they look at the local match portion, which always gets me anyway. So that's where our project list is right now. The project list, I think the city is going to end up with between 20 and 24 named projects. We currently have 9 capital programs on there. They're very similar to the capital programs the city has now. City currently has 10. We've actually combined the sidewalk infill project. We had it split into 2 different areas before. We've combined that to one sidewalk infill program. And there are detailed descriptions written on your spreadsheet. And I think that it got truncated in some fashion, so I can get that to you if you needed to see more detail on that. Or I could read them for you, but I would bore you. I'm worried about that. And then on the transit and the RTA 2 ballot, transit had 4 programs. This time we have 3 again. They're very strategically aligned at what works better and what we've even found better, even working with RTA 2. And they're also tailored specifically looking ahead of where we want to move forward for enhanced transit operations through this next 10-year period. And then the Parks Department in the past has had 7 parks programs, and their improvement programs where they have named trail systems. This one they have 9. So they added one, and then we've worked with them to add the Midland Trail Corridor, which we're actually proposing be one of the joint projects, because if you look at it, the Midland Trail impacts the city, El Paso County, and Manitou Springs. And that is an opportunity-based program that could have 0 funding in it, or it could have an exuberant amount of funding in it, depending on how the local government goes and funds that. But the intent there is to leverage other grant opportunities, both on the state and federal level, to look for to finish that particular trail system. And the example I always like to use, US 24 at Ridge Road came out, and the Cities Connect COS project is one of the highest desired trail improvements. And that one of the desires is, the Midland Trail happens to sit on the north side of US 24, and Red Rocks part happens to sit on the south side. The problem for the city is we don't own the right of way, and it's not in our jurisdiction. So even though we desire it and we see the benefit and our citizens are asking for it, it's not something we could do by ourselves. So it makes sense to collaborate with the county on that particular project. And the reason why I mentioned that too, not only was it highly requested from a non-modal improvement or non-motorized improvement, CDOT has interchange activities planned in their 10-year plan at that interchange. So I want to make sure we're set up. I think we all want to make sure we're set up. If there's an opportunity to piggyback on activities CDOT's doing, whether we get grant funding or not, we put our RTA dollars in there, that we have an opportunity to address a network need.
And you brought up something that applies to what I think are several projects on this list. like the railroad bridges and you were talking about 24, there's a long range improvement plan and stuff for Highway 24 that PPACG has been submitting in their long range plan and their tip and all that kind of stuff. No, maybe not the tip, but that's been identified all the way from 21st Street all the way out to Manitou and maybe beyond. And so when we put in these list of projects, if that gets funded, then you want to be prepared to incorporate your desires into that overall plan, I would assume.
Yes, to the extent practical where CDOT's not depending on us to be a large contributor to an activity, they should be doing it. I mean, we're trying to do it smartly, if that makes sense.
Right.
That if they have an opportunity coming up, if we can piggyback on it and do what we need to for our community to remove some of the barriers that exist within our transportation system.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm as you know, I'm a proponent of our trail network here, and I'm one of those people who are making a lot of noise about the Midland Trail. So I am.
You're the
guilty as
reason why
charged.
this is a joint project. You know
Yeah.
this, right?
Well, that's my
And
question.
I mean, in a good way. But
Yeah, it's a joint project, and I know it's been asked by the community, the trails community, and the bicycling, pedestrian, and so forth. But going back to the Midland Trails improvements, I kind of see this as the non-motorized version of like our West Avenue Action Plan, and you know that was actually considered very successful for Manitou Springs and the county and the city. But the question here, a couple of things, is the Midland Trail improvements, even though it's a program, does it make sense? And maybe you've already covered this, but just kind of walk me through the thought process here. We know on the eastern terminus of the Midland Trail, it's at the Pikes Peak Greenway, but on the western side, as you go towards Manitou Springs, it's a little nebulous as to where it ends. I do see on the map that Jennifer provided, it's hard to read, by the way, but it doesn't go all the way into Manitou Springs, at least as far as the map is highlighted there. I just wanted to understand if we were to put money into the Midland Trail improvements, do we have kind of a meets and bounds or a boundaries for this? Because I know it's a named trail, but it's not like the Pikes Peak Greenway where we know it's all within the city. This one spans multiple jurisdictions. So does it make sense to put, you know, Pikes Peak Midland Trail improvements, Pikes Peak Greenway to Hiawatha Gardens?
so it is intentionally not like that. And let me tell you why.
Okay, so you
Because
have
if-
put thought into it.
Yes,
So
I
walk
have
me
put a
through-
lot
walk me
of
through
thought
that.
into this.
Walk
And
us-
let me, there's a couple different things, and none of our trail improvement programs show the extents. And a couple reasons, because Pikes Peak Greenway is a perfect example. It's very long. It's been on the RTA 1 and RTA 2 list, but it runs, I wish I knew the mileage now, but it runs for many miles through the city. I would imagine it's at least 13 just within the city boundaries.
It's a 50 miles by the mile markers there, goes all the way to.
Yes, but
into-
just through that, anyway, just through the city piece, but if we go and apply dollars, we can't imply that the entire thing is going to be completed with PPRTA dollars. We're going to leverage those PPRTA dollars for opportunities being grant dollars in. And so the work that's going on the Pikes Peak Greenway right now is a perfect example where Parks Department has taken those dollars and gone out and gotten a grant funding from, it's actually federal funds that's managed through the state to apply to that system. This gives us the opportunity that each member government, if they had the opportunity, would put funds in, or we'd pool funds to go into this program fund to go and either capture grant funds to go and complete something on the Midland Trail, or to use it for an opportunity to, again, to piggyback on another project. But there's no way when you go and look at if the total cost to do the entire corridor, whether we know exactly where it ends on that western terminus or not, would far exceed what we'd be able to do within PPRTA right now. So I don't know if I completely answered your question on that.
Mr. Chair, yeah, the answer is really no. The question is a scoping question, and also is taking it before the voters, and what it, okay, a lot of people, I know the Midland Trail, and I travel on it, and but a lot of people don't. And if you just put a trails program on there that spans multiple jurisdictions, do we have, maybe it's in a blue book, or maybe it's in a voter information guide as to where this is, but I can tell you what the need is for transportation. It is, that's like, for example, excuse me, an example, we just heard a wonderful presentation, our new transit center that's going to be downtown. And so I'm a tourist. Now I want to travel to Manitou Springs. You're going to be using the Midland Trail trail there. And so, you know, that's really the problem we're trying to solve, is to connect these transit hubs or these mobility hubs. And we do have Hiawatha Gardens. I'm just using that as an example, but I wanted to ensure that if we have this program, that a program that funds our Midland Trail, that would be in scope for anything that would between, you know, the Pikes Peak Greenway and Manitou Springs downtown area. Or we would say, or maybe not, but I prefer if we could be more specific here, but if we need to keep it kind of open-ended or maybe less detail here, so we can go after that grant money, I can certainly understand it. And it looks like you have put that thought in there, but that question has come up.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to travel from downtown to downtown Manitou Springs. How do I get there? Midland Trail. Does this program cover the entire trail corridor? And that's really the question, really that's really on my mind, but it will also be on the minds of the voters too. What are we funding here when we have this multi-jurisdictional project?
And we would anticipate more specificity on the projects in the voter guide. What you're going to see on the ballot is, you would see the Midland Trail improvements. The intent is, at least for the city. So if you notice on the city's list, we actually have Midland Trail on there twice. We have one specific piece that's critically missing in any fashion right now. And if you don't know your way to weave through the streets in that area, you would not be able to pick up through that gap. So we plan on specifically addressing that as the city. But in the area, this gives it, again, the opportunity, because even if the trail exists today, and I'm just going to pick at 21st Street, the crossing at 21st Street is not the most ideal configuration. But if CDOT or somebody else comes in and has to do a bridge replacement in there in the future, that's an opportunity for us that we could piggyback on and get a grade separated trail crossing at that location. So it's really intended to, one, if we had gaps that we identified beyond what I have as a separate listed project right now, or other improvements or really enhancements beyond what exists today on that trail network system, it is eligible as a program that can be used by the city, the county, and Manitou Springs, should they choose to, and the opportunity presents itself.
And just one more, follow-up comment. So Jennifer, I guess that map that you have there, if you can just kind of maybe, if you're going to present any maps with highlights there, that would, it was shown on there as a highlighted area, and it doesn't go all the way to Manitou Springs. So that can create some confusion, or maybe that was the intent, but it's not clear by reviewing the map where the western end is of the Midland Trail is. So just point that out. Thank you.
Richard, you were first and then Dave.
I don't think I've ever been so pleased as I have been today. I've observed for the last over a year or two how well the city and the county staffs are working together. And now I am seeing not just the staffs, but the projects that the city and the county are working together. And then I knew, of course, that Manitou Springs and the city and the county work together on that, on a major project. And they are continuing to work with Manitou Springs. And then I hear about the county working with some of the smaller communities. And I'm sure the city would too. It exemplifies what PPRTA is, a regional organization of governments trying to help all communities. And I think we have seen today from the various lists that the staff members have gone through and presented to us, it's just, it's so heartwarming to see it because it is a perfect example of what regional planning and execution should be. Thank you.
David?
In fact, I couldn't add many more words to Richard's already excellent statement. This is an excellent example regional cooperation. I would like to circle back though to comment, Carlos, you had made, and maybe Richard tagging on to yours about Brian's comments earlier about these mobility hubs. So I'm still puzzled, troubled. As I'm looking at the CDOT website here, I'm seeing not one mobility hub in the statewide regional plan. Again, this is all about interconnecting, it's intermodality, multimodality, it's interconnecting transit systems and working regionally with the state as well. I'm still seeing 4 mobility hubs scheduled for the region here. The CDOT website shows Monument, Woodman, the Downtown Transit Center, which still I have to admit here is disquieting to me in a sense that CDOT is showing the Downtown Transit Center as a mobility hub. And then Brian, to your earlier point, Fountain, yes, is also shown on there, but I'm showing 4. I don't see a clear date as to what the status is here, but I do see mobility hubs are absent from this. And if that's the direction the state's going, where we are talking, Richard, to your point about large scale regional coordination of transportation modalities, I'd like to see that something related to mobility hubs and their program is either reconciled, thrown overboard if they've changed that. But according to, like I said, their website, they're showing 4 regional mobility hubs. So help me reconcile why they aren't on here and what you're seeing is Fountain only.
So as I mentioned, our downtown transit center received $8 million through Senate Bill 267. Also part of that was improvements to the Monument Park and Ride, the Woodman Park and Ride. And then Senate Bill 260 is proposed to fund the Fountain Mobility Hub. So that's the plan as I know it. But the improvements at Monument and Woodman, and I think they're also supposed to be doing something with the Tejon Park and Ride. We did a study for CDOT several years ago that looked at how we could expand that park and ride or reconfigure it to accommodate future growth, and also perhaps put in slip ramps for Mustang, so they don't have to circulate through the park and ride under the interstate. They could just get off southbound, serve a stop at the slip ramp, and continue on to Pueblo or wherever they're going, and the same going northbound. So there is some work that is funded. So if you know, that's what they're calling mobility hubs. Yes, those are out there, but I know the Fountain one is kind of what I know is what they're calling a true mobility hub.
Yeah, this is different than what CDOT's showing. And I know this is a very fluid situation. I guess the point is I wouldn't want to see us miss the boat. And if they're throwing a lot of money at that and they'll need regional cooperation money to pull these off, this is probably the best source of regional cooperation money for transportation purposes like this.
Yeah. And can I add on one of the new programs? And remember I told you we reconfigured or described the 3 transit programs. One of them is transit stops and station improvements. And, you know, it's envisioned that they can help support enhanced transit, whether it's BRT or some kind of more frequent services, but those can be used to be mobility hubs within the city network itself. And if we had the opportunity to collaborate with some other activity, that program could be leveraged for that as well.
We got you got that study of that Tejon Court, Nevada, Auto City quadrant that's going on down there that should address part of the park and ride requirement is within that, I would assume, within that study, right?
Well, yeah, I know traffic engineering does have a current study on that South Nevada, South Tejon interchange area. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The other thing, Dave, I would just throw out is being cautious about listing projects that CDOT may look at, because they will look at us to fund it. And we'll get tapped. They started it when they did the first widening of I-25 and it hadn't quit. And they will keep, if we're going to fund it out of RTA, they're not going to fund it at CDOT. And so having the flexibility in the programs to contribute and raise matching funds and this kind of stuff, but without saying without trying to be totally congruent with the CDOT goals and missions, I think probably an important step. But Jennifer?
Mr. Chair, I just want to point out to the committee too, that I think that Love Transit, but they also have a lot of flexible opportunities, through federal grants that, from a roadway standpoint, we can't even apply for those roadways. So if you look at, yeah, and also I think it helps us with the greenhouse, from a greenhouse gas standpoint, that they'll be really more eligible for some of those funding down the road than we will be for roadways. So I think that's something to take into consideration as we're looking at our project lists. Transit is very important, I think, to the community, but we also have to look at, those funding sources as well, because there's a ton out there for, our STP Metro funds that we can apply for. Also, the transit can apply for those as well. And then, but the converse is not true. We can't apply for the FTA grants for those roadways. So I think, I think that and I think that there's going to be a lot more opportunities because of some of the greenhouse gas rules for some of those to be funded through those grant funds versus roadways. So, from that perspective, and that's something that we looked at from the county perspective too, is what do we spend our money on, and how do we look at, how we look at the funding for what types of projects for PPRTA versus all the other things out there that we have to be able to leverage against. So that may, I think, is a consideration that we probably all took into account as member governments that you may not be seeing, on the front end.
And Jennifer, we love roadways because we need roads to operate transit arms.
Gail, were you pretty much finished?
I want to mention two things. So I did not send a map in with Rick when I sent your packets, but he does have a copy of the map. It is actually really hard to read even in 11 by 17. So I did bring one large plot if you kind of wanted to get an idea how the projects are scattered around. So I'll leave this here or stick around a little bit afterwards if you wanted to take a look at it. As Jennifer, I think already mentioned, I'll mention it again, we are just in the early stages of starting to apply the fiscal constraints. There's going to be movements on this list. So please be prepared for that. Understanding we're doing the best we can to come up with the best overall program in this 10-year period we're looking at for reauthorization. I talked about it. I think I covered the rest about the programs and the joint projects, but anyway, I just want to make sure I hit the map piece one more time. And if there's other questions that you have about the efforts, the collaboration that's gone on, or kind of the next steps for us, I'd be happy to discuss those.
All right. Mr. Hoover.
I noticed on here that you have Constitution on here twice, one in the A list, one on the B list. Give you a little bit of history on that. I was on the East-West mobility study a few years ago, and Constitution was taken off of that for a lot of reasons. And we also, at that time, organized a group that strung from all the way from Powers to I-25. There was over 2,500 members to that little organization, and they took Constitution off the East-West, and they also took off the possibility of doing anything with Constitution from I-25 to Paso because of the two schools, because of the residents, because of Monument Valley Park, which you can't go over or under or through, you only can go around because of the way General Palmer left it to us. And we also accomplished getting the Rock Island Trail put in with GoCo money, and we got the open spaces approved by GoCo money so that it's protected for any future takeover except for popular vote. I've also already heard from two groups that know about this, and they knew about it before me, that will be very energetic in opposing this constitution concept. Back in those days, and I don't have any real fine information or data to prove it, but I heard 180 million to go from I-25 to Paseo because of the way the railroad is structured, rescinded or below grade, and the different ideas that they were talking about and we were talking about doing at that time. So I think that in your evaluation coming up, the best east-west at this point is a north-south, which is getting powers done and eliminating the need to put another east-west across town. Because I don't know how you can ever expand Constitution east with the protection we have gotten from putting the trail in and the open spaces.
There's a lot there and I'll try to unpack as much of it as I can. It's kind of interesting. I actually worked on the East-West mobility study like 21, 22 years ago as a consultant back in the day. So I'm aware of some of that history, but I appreciate bringing up. A couple of things though I want to point out. The East-West mobility study that was done, I think it was finalized in 2001, if I'm remembering correctly, did still recommend the Constitution Avenue extension, but it got taken out of further consideration based on, I think, a lot of consternation from neighbors in the community at the time for 20 years. And it became eligible to be a project again in 2021. So you need to go back and maybe look at that history on that. And so, but anyway, kind of setting that aside, just what because I've heard it, there's even been a newspaper article that's got some fallacies about some of the history on that old study. But we still set that whole thing aside and looked at the overall transportation network in the community when we did connect COS. One of the projects we're going to have done, and because we're adding a water line, it won't be open before November, but is that Centennial extension, which comes down to Fontanero, which is currently the Fontanero exit. In fact, that exit is going to be renamed Centennial. What we're proposing to look at for the Constitution extension would also come into that location. And so that would be the Centennial, potentially Constitution interchange, depending if you go east and west from there. There is rail, my understanding is, and I will have to go check in the GOCO, is that the rail or the right-of-way actually already exists for the roadway in its entirety. It's really going through and doing the study and coming up what would be the best alternative for that route to have that full connection that would truly go all the way from the west side of Colorado Springs with the Centennial connection to the east side. So what we're really proposing is we really have a really good, thorough look at that that connection to get that east mobility. And I actually agree with you. The north using powers for north-south that help with the east-west is 100% part of the overall reliability of our overall network. But the city feels very strongly it's time to take a look at that Constitution extension. And I will say one of the things that from a staff perspective and the planning that's been done so far is that it would be a limited access multimodal corridor, really from I-25 till it makes that connection point there at Union.
I disagree with you on the fact you have the right of way all the way to the east, because that's the reason why we established the Rock Island Trail and the open spaces the way we did, was to close it off. Any right of way for anything except the open spaces and the trail. I only got involved, well, I got involved with the whole project, but we were mainly working from Academy to Powers to get that closed off because we didn't want to be the median between the east-west and westbound lanes of Constitution. So that's the reason why we worked so hard to get the designation of protected property on the trail and the open spaces. So I would like to talk with you more about that, and also can get you in contact with some other groups that are also going to be objecting to this.
As you can imagine, I'm getting emails already.
Oh, I'm sure.
Both for and against, honestly, but
But then we went through the same thing. At that time, and I know that city councils don't have to follow previous city councils, but the city council that voted on it at that time said they didn't want to ever see it come back to them.
I'd be happy to send you a copy of the is either resolution or ordinance that has the specific dates in it.
Yes, please do, because we will use that.
Okay, Dave.
Just on the flip side, I want to say I was there at that council meeting 21 years ago. I supported the extension of Centennial Fontanero Constitution passionately, wholeheartedly then, and I respectfully understand exactly your point, sir. And I respectfully would like to enter my full support for moving forward, at least with the study and seeing this to its ultimate conclusion, since we are now kept our 20-year timeframe and we're keeping our promises. It's about keeping promises to the taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do is, in its interest of time, we need to great discussions. A lot of information here. Excuse me. Unfortunately, Gail and all the folks will have to reiterate the same discussions next week at the board meeting. And so what I would like, there were some issues. Keep in mind, this is the first of 3 iterations of the review of this. And so what I'd like to entertain is a motion for us to recommend to the board something along the lines of a good review, questions raised, a few concerns, let the board hear it. This will go to the board next week, right, Rick? And then that I will, in my report out the major issues, particularly the discussion we had about Manitou's general thing and some of that. The individual project definitions, I think it's too early to get into too much of that, Rick, and to that level of detail. So if someone would be interested in making a motion to that effect.
Richard made.
Richard, does anybody, Ed, Dill, second that? Anybody online have any comments or questions or regarding that?
And I apologize, I didn't hear the motion. Could you please repeat it?
I move what Mr. Godfrey said.
So Cindy, it would just be that we did our first review. Had some concerns and questions. I highlight those, but at this point, we recommend that the member government submissions go forward for the next iteration of review.
You'll express our concern, well, I guess specifically with Manitou's.
Yes.
Okay, then thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just want to offer sincere gratitude for all the hard work that's gone into this, and the PPACG staff, city staff, county staff, everybody. This is a Herculean effort. It's taken an unimaginable amount of time, effort, and coordination among so many agencies. Nothing's ever perfect. I'm not 100% satisfied with it now, and I probably won't be when it goes forward, but will I vote for it and will I support it? Absolutely, yes. Again, with the deepest sincere gratitude for all the work that's brought us to this point. This is a remarkable effort, and just want to congratulate and thank everybody involved.
Okay. All right. So it's time to vote. All those in favor of making recommendation to continue to the next step, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. And I agree with you, Dave. I didn't see my street on this list either. So, yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time. All right. Item number 7C, draft Fifth Amendment to establishing IGA. Rick?
This is the set of amendments being called the Fifth Amendment to the establishing IJ that's being recommended by the PPRTA attorney Jennifer Ivy to consolidate some of the Calhan wording. So she and I are recommending it to the CAC and the board for review and approval.
Comments, questions? Any lawyers in the house? Okay. By the way, for those who may not know, Jennifer Ivy and her firm is the legal counsel for the board. So when they get into legal counsel and legal discussions prior to the board meeting, Larry and I have to leave that meeting. So we'll have one tomorrow. I mean, next week. Yeah. Okay. Do I hear a motion to recommend?
Can I ask a quick question? This is Cindy.
Sure, Cindy.
I was reading through it. Can we pass this before the election? Because there's a reference to the extension in November of 22. So is this in anticipation or?
Yeah, this is Rick. Yes, I asked Jennifer Ivy the same question. And she said if the PPRTA 3 ballot measure fails on November 8th, then we'll have to amend. We'll have to do a 6th amendment to change that wording.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Good catch, Cindy. I kind of asked some of those same questions about to Rick earlier this week. So without any, I'll entertain a motion to make a recommendation to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that for approval for the draft Fifth Amendment to the establishing the IGA, Larry Tobias.
Second, Joan Trees.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, everyone. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion, make a recommendation passes. Thank you. Item 7D is a change order report, information only from the city. Anybody have any questions on the city's change order log? Okay, thank you. 7E, El Paso County monthly change order, same question. Any questions for Jennifer? Seeing none or hearing none. Information, we move on. Thank you. 7F, City of Colorado Springs request for letter of support municipal project discretionary fund. Gail, you gonna handle this one?
Yes, Gail Servant, City of Colorado Springs. As we've talked about a lot today, a city and I think all the member governments try to leverage the PPRTA dollars as best we can to get outside grant funding to come in for our community. One of the projects we've talked about in the past is the Tejon, Nevada railroad bridges that are in desperate need of replacement, in particular that Tejon Bridge that hit its 120th birthday just recently. The city has been working on a larger project, not only with those bridges, but also looking in longer term and how that rail alignment looks through the city. Make sure we're getting adequate clearance, looking for multimodal opportunities underneath and the rail network below on that area, and also tying it back into the rail bridge at Shook's Run Trail and then potentially the future roadway bridge on Las Vegas Street. So when we talk about the South Downtown Rail Underpass Reconstruction Project, the bigger picture project in a perfect world, if we could fund the whole thing, would replace 4 bridges. Give us the opportunity for the trail network on the Legacy Loop, improve that roadway clearance on Nevada Tejon, give us the opportunities to open it up for either transit or other multimodal opportunities. We've been working with our consultant at Felsberg Home Oliveg, wanted to do the early design work under the PPRTA funding for the railroad replacement or the replacement for those 2 rail bridges on Nevada and Tejon. We've also been looking at funding strategies to come up with bigger package funding opportunity. And with this new, the multimodal project discretionary grant, which actually has 3 programs underneath it, the city feels like we qualify very well for two of those that could potentially give us the funding opportunity we needed, depending on how they were doled out, to either do the whole project or at least phase 1, which would include the Nevada Tejon bridges. So we're working on the details on that grant application now, but we would appreciate PPRTA's letter of support for this project. One, because we understand and recognize the importance of the community, but two, there would be RTA funding associated with the local match for this grant. And I'm available if there are questions.
Dave?
This does add capacity for passenger rail, is that right, on the railroad right of way?
That's a little bit of a tricky question. So yes and no. Mostly yes. And I say that because these bridges would be wide enough for 2 tracks. And one of the bridges now already have, or some of them actually have 2 tracks because of spurs that go on, like for the old BNSF rail yard is there up around Shook's Run. But they would be able to accommodate 2 tracks. And I say that, one, because yes, you could have one dedicated to freight, you could have one dedicated to passenger rail. I've heard rumblings that we may be asked to add a 3rd rail line in the future.
And that's my question. So
And-
will this?
And we
do that?
don't know the answer to that question yet. When we go through that preliminary engineering and that NEPA process, if the Front Range Passenger Rail or either the railroads come back and say, we want you to widen this to have it 3 tracks wide, even if they only put 2 back today, we would be asking them to contribute more heavily than we're asking them now. So, by the way, I have been in contact with both railroads and at least one of them has agreed to participate in the local match for this grant as well. And they both have agreed to provide letters of support. But
So short answer is consideration is being given for a possible. 3rd
there is, but
passenger rail.
I can't go and ask for a 3rd line today.
Okay.
Yes, it's been kind of a tricky discussion. And I think that the railroads have actually been hesitant to even ask at this point, but they would be happy if it was at least 2 tracks wide as we're presenting it in our grant application.
So the intent arguably is that you wouldn't have to rip out something you're putting in. to
Oh,
accommodate a
that
3rd.
would be the intent, absolutely. And in all cases, whether it's a 2 track or 3 track, I think that if when we go through preliminary engineering, again, that NEPA process, even though we've done a very thorough alternative analysis already, where it's going to have to be revetted again and go through that formal NEPA process. And if the railroads come at that time or the Front Range Passenger Rail comes at that time, says this is consistent with our long range plans, we want you to make it wide enough for 3 tracks, and we would do so at the time again, but looking for other funding to go along with that.
Good. My comment is this has nothing to do with the content other than in the draft letter, you have a letter of support for the city of Colorado Springs. Do we need to add Colorado there? I mean, it's kind of obvious where Colorado Springs is, but do we need to put the state of Colorado behind Colorado?
I just provided a draft. We could do whatever you would like.
I don't care. I just,
I've seen it done both ways, honestly, and I think it kind of depends on who the author is or what's important to them. I just try to make it easier on folks when I'm asking for a letter of support.
I'll leave the decision on that to the experts. That you would assume with the word Colorado Springs that you would know it's in the state of Colorado. But again, you're dealing with a clerk in the federal government somewhere in Washington, DC. So, okay. This is a recommendation, so I need a motion to Rick Hoover makes a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Greg? So we have a motion and a second to make a recommendation to the board to provide this letter of support. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Item number 8, administrative action. Rick.
A couple of highlights on the report of recent board actions. The top priority is that Joan and Anesh were appointed by the PPRTA board to at-large regular seats at their April meeting. And that leaves 3 openings, 1 at-large regular and 2 at-large alternates. We have 3 candidates, and we're in the process of matching schedules so that the board subcommittee of the chair, vice chair, and the CAC chair can pick a date that's available for the three candidates to be interviewed. So that's in the works. But the other highlight is the legislative report. Of course, we didn't have this at the board meeting, but the board's attorney and the board's state legislative lobbyist, Dan Jablan, were both at a committee meeting, legislative committee meeting earlier in the week. I think I sent the email out to the PPRTA board and the PPRTA CAC. The one major bill that we were following, House Bill 22-1062, that would eliminate the sales tax on prepared food, that was killed in committee earlier this week. Questions?
That was a huge dodge of loss of revenue for us. So. All right, any other questions for Rick on that? Thank you very much. 8B is a recommendation. It's a draft policy. This goes back to who applies for grant funding. So Rick, you want to bring this up, please?
So you remember the last month that both the CAC and the board, we heard the presentation from Gail Sturtevant and Jennifer Irvin that they would request that the PPRTA be willing to be the applicant for state funds, state grant funds. And the CAC and the board both gave that a thumbs up, but there was a lot of discussion. So I recommended to the board that we make this a board policy to capture all of the details that were discussed. So I prepared a first draft. It went to the board's attorney, Jennifer Ivey, and then it went to Gail Sturtevant and Jennifer Irvin. So it grew in length with each additional iteration of review. So now we're up to a full page instead of 2 or 3 sentences to capture all the details. So it's now before the CAC and then the board next week to see if you're comfortable with it, capturing all the details correctly for the intended purpose. So if everybody's okay with it, that would recommend a positive recommendation.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ann. It doesn't move
Well-
very far, Dave.
I just wonder, as I read this, it makes a lot of sense. And is this where it says that PPRTA funds can also be used for an individual grant? Sort of thing, match. But
Well, it would have to be a PPRTA project of some sort.
But
So that
will PPRTA help with understanding where to apply and how to apply for grants for some of the smaller communities or not?
I would prefer if the City of Colorado Springs or the county would help smaller entities with where to apply.
Yeah, so these grants are applied through PPACG. So if you have a representative on the Transportation Advisory Committee, that's who receives these notice of funding opportunities and the grant applications. And so that's how you would get in, start the process and get the background on it and what to do for it, if that makes sense.
Do the town managers get that information, or do you know? Do you know?
I'm not 100%. Go ahead.
This is Cindy. We actually have a representative on the PPACG board, and they bring it back to us. So we actually are working on a state grant also, but that's our rep would get the information.
Oh, that's good. Well, Green Mountain does. I'm kind of taken over from you. I'm sorry, but we just had a change in the board. We have a new mayor just yesterday, and it's all shifted. So the new board representative, I don't even know if they've appointed anybody.
And in the past, again, I don't know the answer to that question. In fact, I was trying to remember who would represent Green Mountain Falls, and I'm not sure because
Jen,
they're
you
still
go.
hybrid meetings. So I don't know everyone in person. But typically PPACG sends us in again, whoever was on your TAC, your Transportation Advisory Committee. And in the past, I've seen them actually go to the board members themselves. So I see it come out a couple of different ways. So I usually get it 2 or 3 times, which is good as opposed to not getting it at all.
Yeah, you've got representative on the PPACG CAC as well and the TAC. So,
Well, I represent Green Mountain Falls on the PPACG.
yeah,
So, but, and then Craig is Green Mountain Falls now. But I was just curious how this, it sounds good. But
If you have concerns about not receiving it, John Leosados with PPACG is the transportation lead, and he and his staff are the ones that send that out.
who?
John Leosados,
Yes, because I know him. I've
yeah,
talked to
but
him quite.
and it's either he or his staff that send that information out.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
okay, so I need a recommendation to approve this letter to the board.
This is down. I move the letter be presented to the board as presented.
All right, Rick, will you second? Rick Hoover, second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Any agenda topics for next meeting? Anybody burning issues we need to talk about? Don't see anything online. Any communications, any of the CAC members, Mr. Rick?
PPRTA 2022 annual report. There's one each at your places, and I have stacks of bound stacks, well, with a rubber band, stacks of 10. If you, and there's some back here. If you want to grab a handful on your way out, I'll have them at the next several meetings. If you find a need to want to share them with your neighbors or friends.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say this annual report, we approved this last month and you got it to the printers. This really came out really nice. I think it's a real good presentation to both the boards, the civilian, individuals, and also the public. So it's very straightforward and very informative as far as what's been accomplished. And I think it's a very good product that we're putting out to the public.
Carlos?
Yeah, and I just wanted to pass on my gratitude for the wonderful job you did with the report. And I just wanted also to mention, I did see the advertisement in the Gazette today that advertises the report was in the Gazette, one of the ads there. You can get to the link and, people can download it. So I appreciate you publicizing this in the media as well. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that we're going into the next couple of years into a critical phase as we continue to move along towards RTA 3. And I see a role of this CAC is to represent the positive things that we're doing here and to promote annual reports, report the stuff that we've done here. When you look at, I think we're still the only RTA that puts this kind of money into their community in the state. And there's a lot of people that would like to have the money that we have for transportation infrastructure, and we've got a good story to tell. And as we start down this ballot measure and we start down public opinion forming on the extension of this, we play a role in that. And it's the information that's in this, it's the information that's in Rick's court, or the quarterly reports that come out from the member governments. Those are reference documents to directly answer people's questions and concerns going forward. And so I just encourage you to take the opportunity to look through it, read it, familiarize, and let people know it's available. So that's my 2 cents worth. Right, any other comments, questions? It's been a long meeting, Rick. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and PPACG staff would really appreciate you taking it with you when you walk out the door. All right, with anything else, I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody online.
Yeah.